But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the First Nations people. I'm on Bundjalung country as the traditional owners and ongoing custodians of the land, and look forward to respecting past, present and future generations. I'm on Bundjalung. Are you Gadigal?
I'm Gadigal.
Gadigal, yeah. So today we have Giovanna Lever presenting a workshop, Agribusiness to Agritourism. Giovanna and I have known each other for quite a long time now, and Giovanna started Sparrowly Group, a consultancy that really helps businesses create better business and better workforce and really looking at that future forward, with that future forward goals and mentality in mind, and has done a bit of work in agritourism and has worked with businesses that have been in the tourism industry but also in other sectors as well. Sparrowly has been just a fantastic business to watch evolve and grow and win awards and all sorts of exciting things, and well done to you. And I'm super thrilled that you could present for us as part of Destination Food, even if it's not on the day, but it means we can invite it open to lots more people. So I pretty much will hand over to you. If I'll be here if you need anything, but I thank you for presenting this workshop today. It will be recorded, so people can watch it later. We can share it. And I see you've put the link in, so you're fine there.
Yep, great. Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Hello, everybody. My name is Giovanna Lever, as Holly mentioned, and I'm the Managing Director of Sparrowly Group. We work across a number of industries. We're so lucky. I feel so fortunate that we do, and that we have the opportunity to work across the tourism sector, the agriculture sector, and the verticals within agriculture and tourism, but as well as health and disability and education, just to name a few. A little bit about me and why I'm presenting on agritourism, and specifically around the transition from agribusiness to agritourism. I grew up on the land. I am from Bundaberg, so I was really chuffed that Destination Food was to be held or circled around the beautiful destination of Bundaberg, which is my hometown. So my family owned a horticulture farm in Alloway, which is about 15 minutes outside of town. So I've been working on the land from, as soon as I could walk. I am the child of immigrant parents, so, work. And that's, those work ethics are certainly, a big part of our childhood and growing up. But I guess you could say we were early adopters to agritourism, where we would have a farm gate store on our farm. So, you would have seen, I guess at the very base level, where you have a truck or a big crate or buckets or something similar out the front of the farm. So travellers can just come off veer off on we're on the main road, Goodwood Road, where they can veer off and buy their produce and pop some cash into a little dodgy bucket that we created, and I cut a hole in it so you could pop your $1 for the $1 for a bucket of tomatoes. So we were early adopters, but I think, we have also come a long way in terms of how people perceive food. And we would have our farm gate store because nobody wanted the seconds or the second grades, or as Harris Farm likes to call them, the ugly picks. So you can't sell them to Rockley markets or the Flemington markets down here in Sydney, for instance. So they wouldn't go to waste. We would sell particularly our tomatoes. In terms of Sparrowly Group and the connection between agriculture and tourism and the work that we do, we work across agriculture and the many verticals, but specifically the verticals around agri-tech and agri-tech adoption, agritourism, and also value-adding manufacturing and production. Over in the tourism side, we work in destination design and management, destination development and industry development. So with Sparrowly Group, whilst we have our consulting, we also have our mentoring arm. And so we have about 100+ tourism businesses currently being mentored through our Build Better Business program, of which we have many of those businesses who are agritourism businesses. So today's webinar is to provide you an overview as to why agritourism is an important sector to the Australian social, environmental and economic fabric, and specifically the growth opportunities for the agriculture and the tourism sectors. So I've also shared with you in the chat box, if you want to take a look there, a supporting webinar, a link. And on that link, you'll find supporting webinar of our business planning fundamentals, which I'd also encourage you to copy and paste that link and watch it later. It's a really nice complement to this webinar, but also for today to go into that link and download the business model canvas. So, and if you have a printer close by, you can print it out, or it's also a PowerPoint. So as I'm chatting, you might want to just populate it with a couple of points and some of your initial thinking as I sort of work through it. At the very least today, if you can go and get yourself a pen and some paper, even if it's just a scrap piece of paper, because I'd like you to do a little bit of mud mapping as well and just get a bit of the creative juices flowing. Now, Holly, I'm not checking the chat box as we go. So if there are any particular questions or anyone's having any issues, let me know. Okay. Oops, sorry. Alrighty, so in terms of today and what we're going to go through, three things. Essentially, we're going to identify what is possible on your farm, creating a desirable experience, and designing your business plan and bringing it to life. But first of all, let's chat about, why agritourism and, why is it relevant? It is one of the fastest growing sectors of tourism in Australia and globally, and it contributes approximately 11 billion to the Australian economy and growing. Consumers are focusing less on buying things and more on doing things. And if COVID has, taught us anything, it's been, very much around that people want to go out and do and connect and get closer to nature and the land, and also a real interest in terms of, what they're eating and where their produce comes from and what have you. So it also creates a direct connection between the primary producer and the end consumer. It's also great in terms of diversification models and building and supporting business sustainability. Anyone who's worked on land and across agribusiness will understand, pricing fluctuates, right? Depending on what's happening, broader environment, and of course the good old demand and supply. So, being a child, of a family farm, I saw many years with my parents in overdraft and really stressed out. And then I saw some bumper years, and taking, those checks to the bank were very exciting, for my parents. But, it's not always, fantastic, the years. So having some revenue diversification, in particularly, with agritourism and the advent of value adding, is a really good way to help, balance out those ebbs and flows. It helps to monetize underutilized assets such as farm buildings. And when we do our mud mapping later, we'll talk to that a bit more. And also around developing new markets for farm produce sales. Of course, it provides additional employment to support the family to remain on the farm. And the social and mental well-being for isolated agribusinesses. So bringing people to their property, to their farm, and connecting with people and talking. So just some, key stats. Now, these stats are from 2019. And of course, 2+ years, we've all experienced the restrictions around travel with COVID, but also the uplift because of that, when we were allowed out, the uplift of domestic travel with international restrictions in mind. There's still, so this is 2019 data. I'm not going to read it all out. You can see it on the screen here, but there is a body of updated consumer demand research that's about to be undertaken for this sector to measure that uplift and opportunity. But for now, you can definitely see from the 2009 figures that there's certainly significant demand. So let's talk about creating desirable experience and what that means for the customer. So in terms of visitors, they're looking for experiences that are safe, that are authentic, that connect them with nature, promote sustainable practices. And this is where the pillars of sustainability and agri really come nicely together. It connects them with the producer and to the food that they're eating and to the land, and it gets them closer, of course, then as a result to the source. So I want you to bear that in mind as we go through, I guess, the thinking when designing a desirable agritourism experience. So there's lots of different types of agritourism experiences, but I've just popped in some of the key ones to think about. So of course there's farm gate and direct to consumer. So farm gate's everything from the crate of tomatoes that you can pull over, or the sweet potatoes. There's lots of them in Bundy, for instance. Pull over and purchase and pop your money into a jar or an honesty box, essentially. Or there's direct to consumer. So Grazed and Grown, for instance, farm in Port Macquarie has a direct to consumer with their eggs. Accommodation, so experiences on the land that have accommodation, and you'll see there's certainly been an increase around that, and there's quite a number currently being developed up in the Mackay region, specifically around the Pioneer Valley region. There's of course events, so specific events all tailored around the land and agriculture and what have you. And we've seen particularly events, down in up in Orange that's about to happen with Orange 360, up in Bundy with their annual event, and around the country. And then of course there's workshops and classes where people come to learn. They might come to learn more about the permaculture practices if you are a permaculture farm, and specifically around relay farming. Or it could be you're coming to the property, there's a, might be down the south coast of New South Wales, and you're learning about oysters and the beautiful oyster products that are available in the preparation, and so you end up then cooking something beautiful and then eating it together in the cooking classes. And then of course farm tours, so Full Circle Farm over on the Central Coast do these really amazing farm tours. So just thinking about your tourism offering now, and perhaps you're still in the early stages, or you may be a destination looking at how you could design an agritourism pillar as part of your destination offering. This is where the business model canvas will come in handy. So remember I mentioned the link earlier in the chat box. In there is a downloadable link, which is the business model canvas. But look, don't worry if you haven't downloaded it, grab that link for later. What I'll also suggest is when you go to that link, you watch the Business Planning Fundamentals webinar. It's a great complement to apply to what we discuss here today. So essentially, when you're designing a product or experience, there are three key principles that we'd like to, I'd really like you to think about. The first of all, it's desirability. Do they want it? The second of all, it's feasibility. Can we build it? And the third one is viability. Is it worth it? So we're going to kick off with desirability now. And what I want you to do is, think about your property or your destination, or look, and if you don't have your own property, or you're just someone who's interested, you're someone here who's interested in agritourism, or you work in the sector, think about your ideal experience. And what I'd like you to do, and I am going to give you a couple of minutes, just really, really quickly on those pieces of paper, and don't worry if it's a scrap piece of paper, doesn't have to be pretty because no one's looking, mud map your farm. And what I want you to do is when you're mud mapping your farm, think about where the shed is, think about, where the easements are, think about the high producing and the high yield for production parts of your farmer, and then think about those underutilized spaces. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and I'm going to pop my video off so you don't need to look at me, and you can look down on your page just so you can do a bit of a mud map. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes. So as you are doing your mud map, I want you to consider on point 2 here, what's the points of difference? What's possible in the space and will complement the region's offering more broadly? Who will come? How will I execute this concept? Who has done this or similar before? And how will this impact other areas of the property? So keep that in the back of your mind, but for now, let's just get the drawing down pat. Holly, I reckon you could probably draw this with your eyes closed, given Pinecrest.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was sketching out in my amateur drawing skills.
Don't worry, my mum always says, you know, she wishes that we went to a full-blown agritourism experience. Of course, being from Italy, it's been around for decades and decades, particularly over in Europe. But yeah. Life was very different back then. But we had our farm gate. All right, how's everyone going with their mud map? Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about really identifying the high producing and high yield for production and the underutilized spaces in the first instance. Okay, and then when you go back and you replay this and you do the exercise in more detail, again, look at those considerations and then apply across. So essentially, if you have high producing and high yielding parts of your farm, you're naturally not going to be creating or building upon the you don't want to be clearing that away for agritourism offering. But what you can do is look at those parts of the property and how you could integrate it. But of course, you need to consider things like HACCP laws, and in some parts of your farm, you just can't have people en masse coming and traipsing through your property. So you need to consider that in the back of your mind. All right, so then the second point that I mentioned earlier was around feasibility design. So once you've thought about the desirability, so do people want it? And like I mentioned, the business planning fundamentals talks to identifying your customer and your value proposition and what have you. The next step is the feasibility. So, should you build it? Essentially, and that looks at things like key activities, key resources, key partners, etc. So when you're thinking about feasibility design, key considerations need to be around what do we need to consider about the space? I think I mentioned just earlier around legislation and WHS and HACCP and what have you. So what you can and can't do when you are a functioning agribusiness, so to make sure that you're still meeting those requirements. And you want to be thinking also about considerations like sewerage. You want to be thinking about parking. You want to be thinking about logistics. So if you have semi-trailers, if you've got Lindsay Brothers coming in and backing in to take your pallet loads of produce, for instance, you would need to consider a separate entry to where the semi-trailers or other transportation and logistics companies will come in and out if you are at that scale. But in general, things like sewerage, very, very important, because you need to think about the toilets and the other amenities that you will need to have available for your customers. Think about and start to review your current development approvals, local and state, to understand current land use. Now, a bit of a word on all of this. I get that some of you might have some really big ideas, and that is so exciting. But it's really important in the first instance that you take the time to understand what you can do on your farm. Okay, so what is possible now and what's potentially possible down the line? So I've just got a couple of notes and I just want to share on this because this is a real point of contention across the whole country around land use. So New South Wales, government is currently undertaking an agritourism reform through the Department of Planning and Environment. Now, this was as a result of the Making Business Easier initiative program about 3 years ago through the New South Wales Small Business Commission and Service New South Wales. So the team, so this basically what this means is there currently aren't any specific planning rules around agritourism, because although we feel like it's been around for a long time in Australia, it's relatively new in the broader scope. So I'm talking like broad, when I say relatively new, I'm saying relatively new, a few decades relatively new. So they are in earnest looking at these reforms, and then they basically go down to the local government level, and then the local government will then look at how to apply them for each specific local government. So up in Queensland, for instance, they're starting to put more into this with the Queensland Farmers Federation Agritourism Roadmap, Queensland, and the Growing for Queensland strategy. So if you're in Queensland, for example, you want to be getting across these things more broadly as well. So this talks specifically to agritourism, but it's a journey, okay? Because there are, because there aren't specific rules, and there are a lot of holes and I guess sort of areas for interpretation. So what you can do as a business is get across what is currently possible on your land and understand that. So not to harbour on it, but this is the sticking point for a lot of agri-tourism businesses. I want you to also think about, when you're thinking about feasibility design, well, what resources do I need to bring this to life, and we're talking about, resources, we're talking about staff, we're talking about, tools, like, what do we need to build, new infrastructure, etc. And finally, who can you connect with to build your network and support you? Okay, I think it's really important. Collaboration is really, really key. I think Angela Maguire from Enniskillen and Orchard is on this call. And yesterday I heard her talk, and she talked about that, within your destination, you have to look at your fellow businesses, not as competitors, but as collaborators. And, certainly talking to other agribusinesses who have gone down this agritourism journey, is a great way to start, but also with your regional tourism organisation and also with your local tourism organisations as well. And then finally is about viability. And this is the section that nobody loves or likes to talk about, because it's about the money. And this is about, is it worth it? Okay, so some things you can do in the first instance is creating a simple budget and setting some cost structures. So when you're setting your budget, again, it's looking at what would the operational costs be, and what is, when you think about then resources, when we talk about feasibility and, do you need to be building infrastructure? You need to think, and what I'll say here is what's really important when you're designing your budget is that you understand what the market is willing to pay for your experience. So research is really, really key. But it's also the fun bit, because agritourism, right? So when you're off and traveling, make sure you stop in and have a look at as many places as possible, and take note in terms of, what their offering is, what the costing is, what the experience is. And consider the base cost structures and ways in which you could build over time and continue to value add to your experience. So you can't do everything overnight, so build upon it. So we've recently worked with Macadamias Australia up in Queensland as part of their broader expansion with their production value add facility and, of course, their new tourism facility. Now, they are an incredibly large, multi-generational agribusiness, but they started with a very simple farm gate to test and learn, and you could go in, purchase the macadamias from their reception desk. So they started small too, and then built and built, and now they've got this amazing facility, which I certainly encourage you all to go and check out. But look at how you can learn and and build. And so these are things that are really important. But understanding the viability, the revenue and the revenue potential, and the expenditure is really, really critical. Please don't go in blindly when you are designing your agritourism experience. Low risk is always a great way to start. Using another Bundaberg example, because this is destination food and it was held in Bundaberg, Tina Berries. She has an amazing experience, a strawberry farm heading out to Bargara. And it started very, very simply. How were they going to use the excess strawberries during the year, and so they didn't go to waste? So they created an ice cream where you could go pick up an ice cream and take it away. And she tested and learned, and she built upon it. And slowly, as she learned and could see the market demand and the opportunity, then started to expand out the agritourism experience. So in summary, 4 key points. Apply the learnings that we've gone through today and map it to your own business model canvas. So just to recap, the link is in the chat box. There's a supporting webinar and an editable document. Keep connected and build your community. Start small, test and learn, and build from there. Take a balanced approach. You don't need to, Rome wasn't created in a day, right? So slowly and build up. And be authentic. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but you're inviting visitors onto your property. You're sharing your space with them. It has to reflect you, and it has to reflect your why. So it doesn't matter if you are a small agritourism operator and you're just starting out with farm gate, or you're looking at a multi-dimensional, multi-offering agritourism experience. It still has to have the core of you and the agribusiness in mind. And then just finally, just to keep in touch. So I invite you all to keep in touch with me, work on your business model canvases or your ideas. And if you ever want to just sense check anything, chat through, happy for you guys to connect it. And this is just a service because we think that it's important to help build and nurture the industry. So there's my phone number, email, pretty easy to get in touch with. So jot those down, keep in touch, or you can find me on LinkedIn or jump onto our website as well. But the offer is genuine if you just want to sense check or pick my brain about anything. That's it from me. Over to you, Holly.
Thank you. I've just put a message asking if there's any questions for people that can raise their hand, or look, Giovanna's offered her email address, so you can always message her directly. I know I will share the links post-event and also a recording of this. So that is all good. You can get everything you need there. And yeah, thank you so much, Giovanna, for sharing that with us. I think I loved the idea about looking at those underutilized spaces. I think it's such a great place to start thinking about. I think that's really triggered a lot of ideas, in fact, for me. So
yeah, for sure. And that's, I think, key, because you don't want to be it's about diversification, right? So you don't want to be taking away from the high producing areas. Interestingly, when I was in Bundaberg a couple of weeks ago, my first port of call was not to the clients, sorry clients, but to my family farm, which has now been sold second time around, but to the grandson of my mum and dad's best friends. And they have turned it into an avocado farm. And so I jumped into the truck, and Kevin and I took a drive around, and I was like, and my mind was just like tick, 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 tick. I had all these exciting ideas, because the avocado I could see with the way it had been obviously planted in, and also it's also been landscaped. It's really quite beautiful. I was thinking, oh, this would be so beautiful for farm picnics. So it's really, it's endless, the opportunities that exist.
And it can be those fresh eyes as well, coming in to have a look. Joanna has asked a question about creating, how important it is about creating community with other businesses. I know we talked a lot about that throughout the day at Destination Food. I think it was a bit of a theme, which was fantastic. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's critical. You can't work in a silo. You just absolutely can't, because and that's just more, broadly, not even just for destination development and agritourism, but just in business in general. You've got to work together, you support one another. And if I think about just how farmers work, forget about tourism for a minute, and how farmers work, they support each other. You need if you need a backhoe and you don't have it, you go and borrow it from the farm next door. For instance, if, we had cane next to us, we were on the Hort farm, and then we had cane. So my dad would go, over and help the next farm, his mates, with the burning of the cane, because they needed extra bodies. And, you just support each other. I mean, you talk to each other. And I remember a lot of the younger farmers coming through and coming to visit mum and dad and asking them for advice and what have you. And in fact, the grandson of the mum and dad's friends, who bought the farm and now have avocados, it's the grandson's dad, so the middle generation, who's actually running it, and he worked on our farm. And so he said, I learned everything from your dad. So it's that spirit of generosity and sharing for success. And that's very much that's the agribusiness way. And it's also the tourism way. So it's, if you don't connect and you don't have a community and collaborate, you're also not going to get the great customer and, the referrals and what have you as well.
And people, I think about my family, they want to see longevity in what they're doing and in their business. And especially, it's a difficult time in farming. Look, it always has been, but it is a difficult time in farming. And what we want to see is these farms succeeding. This is what it's all about. We don't want to see this land divided up for real estate.
No, that's right.
We want to see that this model can build on success. Feel free, Joanna, to ask questions. That's fine.
And I will just say too, the current climate that we're working in, or living in, particularly what's happening globally, not just with the pandemic, but what's happening in Ukraine, is having an effect on agribusiness right now. The cost of production is going up. So next time you're at and buying your fruit and veg, for instance, and you're moaning about the cost, you've got to consider it's all affecting down the supply, chain. It's really important to remember that. So thinking about that, and if you're an agribusiness and you want, and if you've got a lot of waste, for instance, think about value adding as a sector to start.
We heard from Tina from Tina Berries at Destination Food, and
she's amazing.
She was talking that really that whole agritourism side of the business started from waste, getting the waste from sort of 20% down to 1%. Is such a great story. And I know back in the day, that's with Bilpin, where I'm from, in the Blue Mountains or in the Hawkesbury, there was always, you were able to sell your second apples for apple juice or for cider or whatever. So there was that real community there working on it. Now, if 100%. Anyone has the opportunity to go to Bilpin at the moment, it is peak apple season and it is a bumper crop, and they're really struggling at the moment to get rid of all their fruit because the roads have been closed for so long due to flooding. So if there's any opportunity for any people to get up there and pick your own, or even just buy from a farm gate, it would be well supported. There's a couple of questions.
Yes, I can see. Yeah. So the first one from Joanna around value adding, and just to continue on, I guess, to my point earlier, it is absolutely critical. Big part of agriculture is about sustainability as well. We don't, farmers, producers, we as consumers, we don't want to be throwing out, good produce. So particularly if we can help, I think value adding is a really, really good sector to, or vertical to start with, and it can be just as simple as, got a glut of strawberries, particularly around Sunshine Coast region. My sister teaches at a school near Chevelham called Chevelham School, and she's surrounded by the strawberry fields. She's been making strawberries till the cows come home because there's such a glut, but she won't sell it. But anyway, she's a bit crazy like that. She just gives it away for free. But my point being is that, even if you don't have your own property, there are lots of farms who need to move produce. So, you might want to be looking at starting your own value add, offering or product. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But to your point, Joanna, absolutely. You can only buy so many apples or peaches or pecans and, and what have you. So, but visitors do want to take a little bit of the destination home, which is why, we all got to have the most beautiful box from Bundaberg of all the value add products. So value adding is a really great revenue stream, but it's a great advocacy and marketing tool for your destination and your business as well.
And I think it's also that shows that you need that balance with your local community or where people are coming from, as well as your tourists. So it is really getting that support from within your community, or whether even that is, an hour or an hour and a half away, to balance what you're actually, I guess it comes back to looking at your market, right? Where's your market
100%.
coming from for what you're actually selling? Yeah.
And then I can see Kate Giles, who's actually from Bundaberg Council, who's popped a really good comment there. And this is where we talk about test and learning. If you're not sure, you just want to sort of see what's possible on your, and test the market, look at, things like events. And that's certainly something that Macadamias Australia did as well, working with Bundaberg Tourism and Bundaberg Council in with events and how they could have, host the family. I think it was like the Sunday family picnic as an example. So as I mentioned earlier, it's really important. Start the dialogue and the conversation with your local council, economic development team, and the planning team, but get in there and start talking about what you're thinking about, your intentions and what have you with local council earlier on. And then you find your advocates within council too, who will help you connect the dots within the machine of, of council, because there's lots of different, elements to consider.
Yeah, grow and build as you go. Well, look, we could talk all day.
We could.
As we have done in the past. But yeah, thank you very much again. As I said, we'll follow up with links and recordings and all sorts of things this week. And if any questions, please feel free to email myself or Giovanna, and we will go from there.
Thank you. And thank you for listening a month later. I'm sorry I couldn't be at Destination Food on the day, but thank you. I appreciate everyone stopping and taking the time.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Holly.
Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.